Okay, time being 7 o'clock, I'd like to call to order the Somersworth Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for Wednesday, March 5th. And would the clerk please call the roll?
Richard Brooks.
Here.
Brad Fredette.
Present.
Ken Vincent.
Here.
Ken Hilton.
Here.
Anthony Jones.
Here.
All right, and seeing that we're missing a few full members, I'd like to appoint both Ken Hilton and Anthony Jones as full voting members tonight. And first order of business is approval of minutes from the February 5th meeting. Mr. Fredette,
Like to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented, Mr. Chairman?
do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Anthony Jones. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? One abstention, I would assume. All right, so that passes 4-0 with one abstention. And under old business, do we have any old business?
No.
All right, moving on to new business. First order is Michelle Rahman is seeking a variance from Table 4.A.5 to allow a tourist home short-term rental on a property located at 78 Salmon Falls Road in the Agricultural District, Assessors Map 52, Lot 17A, ZBA Case Number 2, 2025. Ms. Crosley, if you could give us a little info on that.
So the applicant is seeking to utilize the existing property as a tourist home, also casually called a short-term rental. They're proposing to rent the entire home as a short-term rental to a maximum of 6 guests. If the variance is approved, the site and use would be reviewed by minor site plan. Tourist homes are defined as any place consisting of a room or group of rooms located on one premise where transient accommodations for sleeping or living purposes for not more than 6 persons are provided for a price. You may notice in the table of uses that the agricultural district is listed under special exception and prohibited. Based off of section 19.28B1 public provisions, the regulations are not intended to it indicates that it indicates whichever provisions are more restrictive or impose high standards shall control. So because it's listed in prohibited and special exception, the prohibited rules, therefore the applicant is seeking the variance. This lot was subdivided off of map 52, lot 17, which is the only historic application regarding the property. They have addressed the 5 criteria, and so the board can take action on this variance tonight.
Do we have an applicant here for this?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
And it's going to be to the planner. Just so I'm clear here. So, if I own a home in Somersworth, I can't rent it to somebody without permission?
How long? So it's the difference between like a rental property and a short-term rental is how long they are renting it. So because they are renting for transient accommodations, rather than creating if they wanted to rent the entire property as a rental unit for someone's permanent provisions, they have a rental agreement, things like that, typical rental apartments and things like that you see, that's different than a tourist home. They're specifically looking for short-term renting, the Airbnbs, things like that you typically see.
That would be my next question, Mr. Chairman, if I could. So Airbnbs have to all go through this?
If they are in the zone if they're not permitted. So if the property is located in the agriculture, business, commercial, industrial, historic, moderate density, industrial, R1, R1A, or mobile home, then yes, they would need to seek a variance. If they're located in R2 or R3, they would seek a special exception. They are permitted in RC, RB, RO, and mill yard. They should be reviewed for the site.
Thank you for the explanation because I think it gives a little bit more clarity to the board. Thank you.
Of course.
Any additional questions before we move on? No? So, do we have an applicant here? If you don't mind approach and just state your name for the record.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Rahman.
Just make sure that green light's on so that...
Oh, hello, can you guys hear me?
Perfect, thank you.
Hi everyone.
So if you don't mind, just speak to the ordinance some. Some people just recite what they've written down. You don't have to. You can summarize it. Just give us a little detail, and then
That'll
after,
be easier. Thank you.
and just to give you so you know what happens after you present it, we'll actually ask if anybody from the public wants to speak. We'll allow them to have an opportunity, then we'll ask you back up for questions and discussion from there.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, so the reason why I'm requesting this variance is because around 2023, I used to live in that residence. I still do from time to time. And back then, I was traveling a lot for my work. I used to be a sales engineer, and sometimes it required me to go outside of the country. And so I actually put the house in Airbnb, called the city hall, and in 2023, there was no such thing as a license, permits, and I was actually allowed to do that in my property. But a few months ago, when I was unemployed, I wanted to rent out the house again in Airbnb, and I called the office, and they mentioned that because of the zone, I'm not allowed to do Airbnb unless I go through the process of this variance. Again, this is not for me to do a business in the community. I live here. My belongings are actually in my house right now. It's just for me to maintain myself a little bit while I'm unemployed, but also make a little bit for the amount of the finances that I took while I'm being unemployed as well.
Okay, and obviously there's 5 criteria that we have to go through. If you want to speak to those, you can. If not, we'll just save that for when we get you back up for questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Do you want
I
anything
can.
additional before I open it up to the public?
I don't have any questions. I would like to open the floor for you if you guys have any questions around my application.
We'll move into questions after we let the public speak, if there's anyone that wants to speak from the public.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
But we have to allow the public the opportunity to speak. So if you're done with your presentation, we're going to ask you to sit down, have anybody that may want to speak from the public, and then after that, we'll have you back up to ask questions.
Yeah, I think one last thing I'd like to add to this is, aside for being a short-term rental, sometimes, and even last year, we had our contractor living in the house for a couple of months. So it's just not people going in and out all the time. We also have nurses, professionals, young professionals staying at my property. But yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to add to my petition.
All right, then, like I said, I'll just have you step aside for a minute, see if there's anybody from the public that would like to speak.
Thank you.
All right, if we do have anyone from the public, just please approach the podium.
Can you just formally open the public hearing?
Yes, and formally opening the public hearing for
Thank
this
you.
application. And if you would, just please state your name and address for the record.
Darren Ray and Richard Adams, 71 Salmon Falls Road.
All right, I just ask that one of you speak at a time, because obviously this is
We live
recorded.
directly across
Okay,
the street.
fair
And
enough.
We've been there 25 years, and I do have a letter here from another neighbor that's been there 55 years. We feel that that's zoned agricultural,
Can you just make sure you speak into the microphone?
and granted, we haven't had any problems with the people that they've had in there. They take very good care of their property, but they do not live there. They live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, because it's right on their paperwork for the Airbnb that they've been running for 2 years. I said, we are zoned agricultural. If they get this variance, it will open it up for other people in the area that have an Airbnb. And then what happens then when you have 10 people with Airbnbs, and we're supposed to be agricultural? Anything with you?
They were talking short term. Last year was over 6 months. There was 4 different vehicles there. We don't know. Like my wife said, it's been fine. We haven't had problems with anyone, but this just opens a whole can of worms that anybody can come and go if they're not here to oversee their thing. And we don't know who's coming. The area's elderly people are all kind of retired. So what we want is for you folks to think hard before you start opening up the city to people that don't live here. They're not bringing anything to us. You know, they get to register their vehicles in New Hampshire. They live in Massachusetts. You get to vote, both states. You know, how does this work? We're here to, you know, we just need answers to what, those are our concerns.
Obviously, we can't engage in discussion with you, but we are certainly allowing you to have your opinion aired and expressed. So, do we have any correspondence as well for this, or?
I didn't receive any, but she mentioned that she has something from.
You wanna
Sure,
read
I
it?
can take it.
Yep.
I can read it into the record too. Thank you. All right, so this is a letter from Peg Toussaint at 69 Salmon Falls Road. They stated, to the zoning board members, I have lived at 69 Salmon Falls Road in Somersworth for 55 and a half years. I understand that a zoning variance is being sought for the property number 78 to allow an Airbnb. I have concerns. This area is zoned agricultural and its residents like it that way. An Airbnb is a business with an ever-revolving variety of residents. The owner lives out of state. The neighborhood recently benefited with a tax decrease because it doesn't have some of the amenities of some newer neighborhoods. Can allowing a business change that and raise taxes? This section is almost completely retirees on limited income. If this property is granted a variance, does that open it up to others easily getting one, whether an Airbnb or other business? I truly hope not. If granted, would the variance continue for future owners? I don't know the applicant. This is not a personal grudge, but this business has been operating for about 2 years, ignoring the need for a variance. As a nearby resident, I hope a variance permitting a business in this zone will not be granted. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend the meeting. I hope this letter will suffice. And that was from Sincerely, Peg Toussaint, 69 Salmon Falls Road. Is it okay that I keep this for the record? Thank you.
And I also have a paper here that states, from
If I could just have you speak into the microphone.
it's on their website, saying that they live in Cambridge, Mass. Okay. It states that they live in Cambridge, Mass.
Okay.
So, if you want that, I can show it to you. It was on their website.
If you want to give it to the clerk, as
Can I get to ask another question?
we can't answer questions, but you can certainly.
Well, no, it was about, how will our, I guess, house values, would they stay the same? Will they differ? That's what I'm asking, I guess.
We've heard your concerns. If you have anything additional you want to add, we'll let you. Otherwise, we're gonna ask the applicant back up for their.
I'd just say the same thing that Peg Toussaint said. It is nothing personal. They're very nice people. They take very good care of the property. They have people come in and mow. It's always, looks very nice. It has nothing to do with them. It's just, it's agricultural, and that's why we live there. That's it.
Enough. Thank you. And I assume we have nobody else, but if there's anybody else who would like to speak, this is your opportunity. Seeing none, if we can have the applicant come back up. All right, so questions for the applicant? Mr. Fredette?
I don't want to speak that this is going to sway my decision one way or another. I just want to clarify. You've said you have belongings in your home. Do you reside there?
No, I do not, because I can't afford right now living in there. That's why I'm renting out the place. I'm actually living, quote unquote, for free with a friend in Massachusetts. However, I do not live in Cambridge. We used to have, when we were together, an address in Cambridge from his mother. So I'm not sure if that's like an old address they might have on file.
Okay, and you don't plan to live there for you don't plan to rent it and live there at the same time. It would be an either or proposition, correct?
Yes, well, I'm unemployed. Correct.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Fredette?
Criteria 5 is usually the hardest criteria to satisfy. Okay, we have a test we have to go through. We have to ask ourselves 5 questions. Criteria 5 is trying to justify, it says, owing to special conditions of the property that make it different from other properties in the area. Denying this, not allowing you to do this, would result in an unnecessary hardship because there's no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance, why we have the ordinance, and the specific application of to this property. That's usually the hardest one. What makes this property different from other properties in the agricultural zone, and correct me if I'm wrong in how I'm phrasing this, Mr. Chairman, that the application of the ordinance to this variance is unfair.
I would say you've got a proper question there, yes.
Yes, so I'm going to answer as how to this is a unique petition, not only for the property itself, but the way I'm approaching the situation. For instance, and thank you so much for speaking, it is true that I am pride in being a responsible homeowner and neighbor. I'm fully committing into preserving the integrity and tranquility of our community. I do belong to this community. My ex-partner and I used to attend to Anatolia, the works all the time. We love being part of this. Again, I just can't afford to stay here. And so although this is not a rental where people can come in and out, it is my personal residence, and I'll continue to treat it with some care and respect as I always have.
Mr. Fredette?
Just to follow up. So one of the concerns of your neighbors is that if we grant this tonight, other people in the area are going to come and ask for the same thing. And their further concern is doing so is going to change the character of the neighborhood. It's going to make it a different type of neighborhood. If we grant this if I vote to support this tonight, and one of your neighbors comes in a month, what justification, what reason can I give them to say, well, I granted it to your neighbor, but I cannot grant it to you?
Yeah, good question. I cannot respond as to how other people will react. What I would do say is that there's definitely measures that I would put in place to make sure that the property and the community stays well maintained. For instance, when we moved in 2023, we already have security cameras in place outside of the property, the entrance, the front yard, the backyard as well. If granted this variance, I'd like to also add some noise devices to make sure that they're not going above the expected volume so that other people in the area are not disturbed. And again, always trying to keep that maximum occupancy, no more to 6 guests.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, if I might jump in here for Mr. Fredette's point. I definitely have an appreciation for kind of those types of items that you're putting on here. The issue with the hardship criteria is that hardship as it applies to zoning is a specific restriction that when applied to your property individually becomes arbitrary, confiscatory. It unduly burdens you in a way that it would not burden your neighbor if they came here for the same burden. That's kind of the item here today. And hardship specifically cannot apply to the physical or economic condition of the owner. So do you have any kind of further elaboration of your argument on kind of why the variance for the hardship applies here?
Could you just give me a little bit more example as to what you're looking to get out of that question? Sorry.
Sure. I can provide an example if that helps.
Yes, please.
So let's consider a triangular shaped parcel of land, for example, where you just want to build a simple single family house on there. Well, a house that is typically square in nature has a hard time fitting on a triangle. So you may need spatial relief to one of the setbacks. If neither of your neighbors have a triangular shaped piece of land, that is something that's unique about the property that would prevent your neighbors from coming in for the same spatial relief. In this case, we're talking about a use for a short-term rental. So what is unique about your property that's well suited to a short-term rental where your neighbor's property is not?
Great question. I think one, for instance, the house is very well maintained. If you were to see the property of people that have come do certain things for their property, they can tell you how cozy it is. So people actually want to stay at our place. We do have a fire pit in the outside. There's great space for it's 1 acre land. So there's a space for them to actually go and make and have a vacation out of that place. Now, I understand that there might be other homes out there which are very lovely, but this in particular to me will like pretty much scream, hey, I want to rest for the weekend.
Thank you.
I have a question myself. Have you tried renting this out just as a regular rental unit? And is there any reason you couldn't do that?
Yeah, so we actually did last year with our landscaper, and I think that's where the comments came from, like seeing other trucks in the driveway. They were actually bringing some of their stuff while they were looking for a house around the area. But I was just evening out in my mortgage. I wasn't really getting, a profit from it. And the reason why I want a profit right now, once again, is just to help myself financially.
Okay.
But yes, we've tried.
Any other questions? Any final comments before we move into deliberations?
Not from my end, thank you.
All right, then I'm going to close the public hearing. You may have a seat for,
We need
Mis-
to do
Regional.
yeah, Mr. Fredette.
Sorry, that's exactly what I was going to say, Ken. We always seem to.
I gotta tell you, you always say it, so I figured I'd be.
Oh, no, sorry. Per RS, whoops, sorry. I move that the variance request of Michelle Roman does not have the potential for regional impact.
We have a second? Second. All those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Those opposed? So that motion passes 5-0. Mr. Vincent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm going to be putting this towards the planner again for a question. So, as I look at this, I really look at myself as a common sense type of person. I really am. I look at this and I say to myself, first of all, agricultural. I'm thinking like, why wouldn't agricultural be able to do this? So, and I think about today's agricultural. I think about, well, what is agricultural? And agriculture is farm, maybe gardens, chickens and pigs and animals and horses and barns, tractors. And I think that you would think that agricultural, because of all the machinery, noise, the activity that starts early in the morning, get those cows milked, the machine starting up, you'd think that that would be more of a nuisance in a way than somebody living in a home. But I understand the concerns of people because, you start opening the floodgates up and then you could have some issues because like the gentleman stated, sometimes you have people come in, if it's not your home, you typically don't treat it like your home sometimes. So I understand that. I've been involved with rental properties. I've owned several rental properties, so I know I've been through the mill, so to speak. But my comment is to the planner or the question, and that is, so is there a definition or any explanation why agricultural is part of this and it's not accepted in that? Or do you have any type of opinion of your own?
I don't have the background to why it's listed as prohibited. When doing research regarding this use in the table of uses, there wasn't really a clear indication regarding why it's listed as prohibited.
Sure.
The purpose, I can give you the purpose of the district for agriculture as we have defined it in our ordinance. I think
Right.
that's about the extent of background I could give for you tonight, which it states that this district is provided for uses of bona fide agricultural, large lot, single-family detached housing, and for the protection of lands not suitable for development because of soils, slopes, and permanent development easements.
Thank you. And if I do have a follow-up, I think. So with this new trend coming, because Airbnbs are really just new as of what, 5 years ago? Maybe a little bit more or less. What are some of the, I don't know if you know some of the surrounding communities, but what are some of the challenges that are coming from this? I mean, are we planning to move down the road, giving some more relief with this type of, it's almost like a business, I'd say, right? I mean, are we looking for, and do we have any ideas what any other communities are doing towards this issue? Because I'm sure you got one popping up, you're probably going to have several more coming about. Any ideas on that?
At this time, there hasn't been any discussion in the planning office for any amendments regarding this use in the ordinance. We have not had it come up as much as probably some of the communities that have lakes or are in the mountain regions. They obviously deal with it significantly more, so they have more regulations regarding short-term rentals.
And I have another question, Mr. Chairman, sorry. So, say we grant this. And there's problems down the road. Does the neighbors get to come forward to your office and say, hey, look, you've granted this is a problem, and we don't like it. Can we change it or reverse it?
If you grant the variance, there's the 30-day appeal period that they can appeal.
I'm aware.
The project would go through a minor site plan, so there would be that review before the site review technical committee, which again, there is an appeal period for that if that's granted. Once that has been approved and if the variance and the site plan have gone through the appropriate appeal periods, residents are always welcome to come into our office if there is any issues. But if there's not a violation to the site plan or any of the local ordinances and things like that, I don't know exactly how much that we'd be able to do if there's not an actual violation of it. If it's just that they don't like it,
right,
that's not necessarily something that we can
right.
act on. But if there's violations, then there's the steps that we can take.
Thank you, Mr.
I'll
Chairman.
just chime in and point out that, obviously with the zoning board of adjustment, we grant variances when they meet the 5 criteria through this process. Obviously, there's a long list of zoning requirements in the city. Some have been set many years ago, some more recent. Adjustments happen throughout the time. But, obviously, this is a permitted use in the residential commercial, residential business, residential office, mill yard. Those are places where we typically allow commercial use.
Right.
I think more of like a hotel, a motel kind of thing, but obviously this is a rather new endeavor in the business world. So, it is a little unique, but it's pretty widespread too, I would argue. I've done a little research. I find that, like Miss Crosley said, when you get into the tourist areas where you have lakes, mountains, tourist destinations, there's far more of this being used and implemented. Obviously here in Somersworth, we're not a huge tourist destination. We don't have a lot. I did look, I found a few of them here in the city when you do a quick Google search, so there are a few others out there. Whether they have variances or not, or whether they're in the zone, I didn't look. I just kind of wanted to do a little research on my own. That's what I saw. You look at Dover, Somersworth, not Somersworth, Portsmouth, there are far more. And it's pretty incredible the prices they get for them too.
Right.
Not that, the funding comes in to our thing, but I can certainly see how it's more lucrative than renting by the month.
Right.
Mr. Fredette?
If you'll entertain me, Mr. Chairman, which you're usually patient enough to do so, I'd like to go through the 5 criteria, if that would be okay.
Well, I'm sure we would at one point or another anyway.
Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. I think I'm going to pass over on this one if the board will grant me the latitude. I don't think I have a clear answer for this one way or another. If the variance granted, would the spirit of the ordinance would be observed, because I would say that granting the variance would in fact be contrary to the spirit of the ordinance, as Ms. Crosley read into the record. And I think I will infer that the agricultural zone is intended for fairly low density development. It mentions single family, large parcels of land. It's for low density development and residential is mentioned. And as the applicant herself indicated, this is to try to make profit as a sort of business. She's not going to be living on site. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. I'm torn on this one because of the concerns of abutters and people living in the neighborhood. They've asked some clear questions that I would say the applicant herself hasn't been able to answer for them satisfactorily relative to, if we grant this, does this guarantee there won't be another one? If the variance were granted, the values of surrounding property values would not be diminished. Again, I think it does, if we allow this, it does move a business into an agricultural zone. I think it could have an impact on surrounding at least abutting properties. I've heard those concerns from abutters. 5, the hardship criteria. Again, I just don't think it's satisfied here. I think I appreciate the effort that the applicant has put into maintaining the property. That's always laudable. I'm sure our development department appreciates that as well. But that alone to me doesn't stand as satisfying the hardship criteria for a variance. And I always try to remind myself we're here to enforce or interpret the variances as written and how they apply to properties. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Jones?
I guess I'll go through the same. Criteria 1, not contrary to public interest. I think the applicant has provided evidence that they're good gatekeepers of the property and taking good use of it, so I don't necessarily believe that the short-term rental here would be contrary to the public interest. Criteria 2, if the variance were granted, spirit of the ordinance were reserved. I don't believe in my reading of large lot single family detached housing, I don't know if that necessarily precludes in the spirit of that the use of lessees in the building rather than occupied by the owner of the property. So I don't necessarily believe that it's at odds with the ordinance within that spirit of that. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. I think it's self-evident that the use of the property by the owner is, how they deem fit. They would be allowed to do this on a long-term rental unit by right, I think is my understanding from discussion here tonight. Obviously, they would receive financial gain, so I think that's an easy criteria for them to tick off. 4, values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. I don't think there has been any evidence here tonight that they wouldn't be, and I think it would be incumbent on the applicant to provide that. So I have a hard time saying one way or the other whether or not criteria 4 would be met, and where I don't have that evidence, I'd have to say it's not met. And then criteria 5 for unnecessary hardship, I don't see anything special about this property that makes it unique as a short-term rental property, and same thing there, I don't believe that criteria has been met.
All right. Mr. Vincent?
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. So, I think the key here is that opening up the floodgates, so to speak. So being on the ZBA is never an easy thing because you have to tell people sometimes no. And they live in the city and they contribute to the city and they pay taxes and they have a home and it's tough. But I just can't see supporting this because it may open up a box of worms in that area. And it's the last thing we want to do. It's kind of like the sign ordinance. If you allow a 10 by 20 sign for one person in a certain district or zone, then everybody else is going to come out and want that sign size. So I can't see supporting this at this time. Maybe there's another alternative. And normally I'm for the people a lot in business, but it's zoned a certain way. And yeah, you want to take agricultural and turn it into something different, go through the channels and pass it. But other than that, I just can't see supporting this.
Mr. Jones?
One last thing I'd like to add, based on Ms. Crossley's analysis earlier at the beginning of the project, I do think it's slightly unfortunate that the use for a bed, breakfast, tourist home, and boarding houses is both included in the special exception and prohibited column, such that we are taking the more restrictive route here. I wonder if that might be a question for City Council to provide clarity on.
I will admit that seems odd that it's listed in both, and I would assume it's a typo at some point. I have no proof of that, but
I think the procedure to get here is correct.
Yeah, normally it's not. Normally you're not listed in two. So again, with the laws noting that the more restrictive takes precedence, we have to go with the prohibited, which then requires a variance instead of a special exception if it was in the special exception category.
Agreed.
So, unfortunately, that's the way this falls. If the city council wanted to change stuff, that's their prerogative, but it, never seems to happen quickly, unfortunately. And again, city council is the one that sets zoning, makes all these rules. That's what their charge is. Our charge is just to, if we find something that meets these 5 criteria, then we grant a variance. And, obviously it takes the 5 of us discussing this, seeing the evidence, and making a judgment call on that. Do we have any other comments? I'll just weigh in for myself. I certainly don't feel that the hardship criteria is being met on this. I just don't see something unique to it that would hold this property, victim to being unfairly targeted by this zoning ordinance. Everybody else in the same area is under the same restrictions, and they're all basically single-family homes in that area, which is exactly what the agricultural has allowed to develop through its own purpose and use. So there's a couple others that I might be a little bit on the fence on, but certainly not meeting the 5th one, the unnecessary hardship, is one that would cause me to vote against this, most likely. Any other discussions, comments, motions? Mr. Fredette?
After review of the application, the file, and all the information presented to the board, I feel that criteria 5, the hardship criteria, has not been satisfied for the reasons discussed, and I move that the request of Michelle Rahman for a variance from table 4.A.5 to allow a tourist home short-term rental on property located at 78 Salmon Falls Road be denied.
I'll second it.
So, with the motion having a second, do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing no Mr. Jones?
Just want to let the record reflect that we don't believe it meets the criteria 5, specifically because the applicant has not provided evidence that anything is unique about the property and how that this ordinance applies to it.
Fair enough. Mr. Hilton?
Separate.
Yeah,
Separate item.
I think we can address that after this application. Sorry. Any further discussion? Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. All those opposed? So the motion is denied, or the application for the variance has been denied at a 5-0 vote. Moving on to other new business. Ms. Crosley?
Yep, I just have a couple of things for you tonight.
Thank you. Sorry.
The new land use board books were handed out to you. So those are on your desk. The business and, let me get the acronym correct. Business and Economic Affairs Office of New Hampshire, they put out the Zoning Board of Adjustment Handbook for local officials. The 2024, updated to 2024 books have been published. We can provide updated ones for you regarding zoning board and case law if you'd like updated ones in paper copy, or we can do it electronically if the board has a preference on that, or if you don't, you just want an electronic one, and then let us know if you want a paper copy, if that works best for you all. We can email that out and share that for you all. There's not typically like a lot of changes throughout the document, and they summarize that too. And then the last thing Anna shared with you recently via the New Hampshire Planning and Zoning Spring 2025 conference is Saturday, May 10th from 8:45 to 3:30. This is an online training. If you're interested in attending, it's free. You could attend part of it or portions of it. If you're at your convenience, you can do it from home. I attended the zoning one last year. It was very informative. So if that's something that interests you, if it's not something that you're able to do from home, but you are interested in it, please reach out to us because we could figure out accommodations to set up something potentially at City Hall. We could host a training session on it, basically. All of us could be here if you'd like. So just feel free to reach out with us any questions. Otherwise, if you want to sign up for it, it's a great training. And I think that's it, unless there's any questions for me.
No, I think the only other thing would be just how do we correct this, what apparently I would assume is a typo with having this listed in the agricultural for short-term.
We can look back into it again. Otherwise, I can talk to Director Mears about further taking it and or even readdressing it for current standards too, depending on what the current desires of the community is for this use.
Yeah, I mean, City Council will get a copy of the minutes from this hearing. They might not get that pointed out to them that this is an issue, but I don't know. I mean, it might not require a formal memo. It might just require a finger on that paragraph in the minutes to kind of take a look at that.
What makes the difference between special exception?
Hardship.
Hardship.
You don't have to prove hardship for a special exception.
Yeah,
That's a much lower lift.
Is your microphone on?
Yeah, I was.
So a special exception is allowed, but it gets a level of review where there's a separate set of criteria that we're supposed to look at, and basically, it's basically just a second look at it to make sure that it's not going to cause any additional problems if it was allowed. It doesn't allow it by right, it just allows a little bit of a review to it, but it doesn't have the same criteria that a variance does. We've got the 5 criteria that we have to meet, and we have to meet those. Whereas a special exception's a little looser and just more of a, but wait a minute, let's consider this kind of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. They're still coming in for formal hearing. Instead of the 5 criteria here, they have, I think, 8 criteria that's on our special exception application, and they are a much, much lower bar to clear than the hardship criteria.
Okay.
So, Mr. Fredette?
Any updates on the ADU?
The planning board supported the most recent changes, which was removal of section K, which requires a permit, a special accessory dwelling unit permit. So that has been forwarded, and the housing, Mayor's Housing Task Force also supported that removal of it. So our hopes is that you will see that on the agenda of the March 17th City Council.
And does it get 2 hearings, 2
Yes, typically. Yep.
2 readings? Thank you.
Yep. And we're hoping that the religious use and the parking amendment will also make its way to the City Council agenda. Something fun for them.
You support that?
What's that? I didn't hear what you said. I don't want to hear what Nate said.
Oh, the ADU ordinance.
Yeah, sure, I guess. I don't know, I gotta look at it.
All right, never mind.
I don't even know what you're talking about, sorry.
Make a
just
motion
wanna
to
be-
adjourn.
I like the second that. What?
So we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment, raise your right hand. All those opposed? We are adjourned.
Where's Mathis?